Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. Just after, that is, we look at the Toke TV Bud Pick of the Week. We have some permafrost flowers this week. Permafrost is a Pacific Northwest bred hybrid. I found these at the Harley Cooperative, which is an access point in Edmonds, Washington, for the bargain price of $10 a gram, and well worth it they are. Some of the best quality smoke in the Puget Sound area. Let's do the news, shall we? In the United States, we have yet another new poll showing a majority of Americans support marijuana legalization. A solid majority, 55% of Americans support marijuana legalization, according to this new poll from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal. That same majority would back nationwide laws similar to the ones in Colorado and Washington state, which allow adults over 21 to possess limited amounts of cannabis for personal use. While 24% of Americans polled don't approve of marijuana legalization, they wouldn't actively seek to repeal such laws if they were backed by state voters and legislatures. More states could go legal in 2014. Alaska voters will get a chance in August to decide on marijuana legalization. Florida's Supreme Court on Monday approved a medical marijuana ballot initiative for November's ballot. Petitioners in Washington, D.C. are trying to qualify a legalization measure for this fall's ballot as well. Americans aged 18 to 34 favor marijuana legalization by a huge 49-point margin. Almost 3 of every 4 people in this age group support legalization. Among those aged 35 to 49, just more than half said they support legalization, compared to 49% of those 50 to 64. Those over 65 years of age oppose marijuana legalization, 59% to 38%. But that one is getting closer as new polls are taken. Party affiliation is also an important indicator of support for cannabis law reform. Democrats favor marijuana legalization by a whopping 34-point margin, 66% in favor, 32% opposed, while Republicans oppose legalization by 23 points, 38% in favor, 61% of Republicans oppose legalization. Among independents, 60% favor legalization and 39% oppose it. Support for legalization runs much higher in the western United States. Americans in Midwestern states, by comparison, are far more cautious. Men favor legalization at higher rates than women, but a majority of women, 51%, now favor legalization versus 47% of women who oppose it. Among men, 59% favor legalization and 39% oppose it. White Americans favor cannabis legalization by a 6-point margin. African Americans favor it by 19 points, and Hispanic respondents favor it by 17 points. This NBC News Wall Street Journal poll was taken January 22nd through 25th and has a margin of error of plus or minus 3.5 percentage points. Big news this week from Congress, where the Farm Bill has passed the House of Representatives with hemp research intact. The Farm Bill passed the House on Thursday by a vote of 251 to 166, and that includes the hemp provision. This is a big first step towards allowing American farmers to once again grow industrial hemp, according to votehemp.org. The hemp provision was originally introduced as an amendment to the Farm Bill by Representative Jared Polis, a Democrat from Colorado, Representative Thomas Massey, a Republican from Kentucky, and Representative Earl Blumenauer, an Oregon Democrat. All 3 of them represent states which have already legalized industrial hemp. This provision allows universities and state agriculture departments to grow hemp for academic or agricultural research purposes. It applies only to states where industrial hemp farming has already been legalized under state law. By including language easing restrictions on industrial hemp in states where it is legal, Congress sends an important message that we are ready to examine hemp in a more appropriate way, according to Representative Blumenauer. Vote Hemp was pleased with the bipartisan support for the amendment and worked with key Republican and Democratic offices in both the House and the Senate to ensure the amendment was included in the conference report, which passed the House on Thursday. Senator Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky, reportedly worked to keep and strengthen the hemp provision in the Farm Bill. We expect our Senate to pass the Farm Bill, and a vote is expected as early as next week, Vote Hemp said in a statement. But our work is not done until all American farmers have the right to grow hemp. Once the Farm Bill is passed the Senate and is signed by President Obama, Vote Hemp said it would be working with state departments of agriculture and with universities to get hemp research started. They'll need expert input to help craft regulations to implement the agricultural pilot programs called for in the Farm Bill's hemp research provision, according to Vote Hemp. Also in Congress this week, a groundbreaking bill reforming federal drug sentences passed the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Smarter Sentencing Act, which is the biggest drug sentencing reform in decades, would reduce mandatory minimums, give judges more discretion in sentencing, and it would even release some nonviolent drug offenders from prison early. Prosecutors are still opposing the efforts to bring racial justice and common sense to the nation's criminal justice system. The U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on Thursday passed this bipartisan sentencing reform legislation that would reduce the federal prison population and save taxpayer money. The reforms are supported by a strange bedfellows group of senators, including Senators Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, Jeff Flake, Republican from Arizona, Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, Patrick Leahy, Democrat from Vermont, Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, Carl Levin, Democrat from Michigan, and Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island. The tide has turned against punitive drug policies that destroy lives and tear families apart, according to Bill Piper, Director of National Affairs at the Drug Policy Alliance. From liberal stalwarts to Tea Party favorites, there's now consensus that our country incarcerates too many people for too much time at too much expense to taxpayers. The Smarter Sentencing Act is the biggest overhaul in federal drug sentencing in decades. Among other things, it would cut federal mandatory minimums for drug law violations so that nonviolent offenders serve less time behind bars. It would make the reform to the crack, powder, cocaine sentencing disparity that Congress passed in 2010, which was called the Fair Sentencing Act, retroactive, so that thousands of people sentenced under the old draconian and racially unjust policy can leave prison early. It would expand the ability of judges to use their own discretion when sentencing defendants so that judges can consider the unique facts of each case and each individual that comes before them. Even though U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder urged the committee to reform mandatory minimum sentencing yesterday, the National Association of Assistant U.S. Attorneys took the somewhat rare step of opposing the Attorney General by releasing a letter in opposition to reform. We do not join with those who regard our federal system of justice as broken or in need of major reconstruction, the organization said. Instead, we consider the current federal mandatory minimum sentence framework as well constructed and well worth preserving. The defense of the current criminal justice system by federal prosecutors strikes many advocates of reform as outrageous and tone deaf, according to the DPA. Even though African Americans are no more likely than whites to use or sell drugs, evidence shows they are far more likely to be prosecuted for drug law offenses and far more likely to receive longer sentences than whites. With less than 5% of the world's population, but nearly 25% of the world's prison population, the United States leads the world in the incarceration of its own citizens. At last, we are fixing laws enacted hastily 30 years ago, said Law Enforcement Against Prohibition LEAP Speaker Eric Sterling, who helped write some of these laws that the committee voted to reform while he was counsel for the House Judiciary Committee during the Reagan administration. You don't have to be an expert in criminal justice to understand the common sense that underlies these reforms. Appropriate punishment is always more effective than excessively harsh punishment, according to Sterling. That this reform is bipartisan is another important sign that America is moving away from the exaggerated fears around drugs that distorted policymaking in the 1970s and 1980s. Despite decades of calls for change from both drug policy reform advocates and criminal justice professionals about the injustices arising from mandatory minimums, and despite the fact that the bill neither repeals minimums nor lowers the maximum sentence for any offense, the National Association of Assistant U.S. Attorneys on Wednesday sent a letter of opposition to Attorney General Eric Holder, who supports reform. This bill does nothing but return some authority to judges to decide cases on their individual merits, as the founders envisioned, said LEAP Executive Director Neil Franklin. While I would like to see us go much further in questioning the basic logic of dealing with drugs as a law enforcement issue, this is an excellent step towards smarter drug policy. It is disgraceful that prosecutors continue to defend a criminal justice system that is profoundly racially unjust and cruel, the DPA's Piper said. While support for major reform is growing in both political parties, many prosecutors are still living in the dark ages. On Thursday, a big story from the UK broke online. Supposedly, a lady in the UK died of cannabis poisoning, but experts agree that that British cannabis poisoning death is bullshit. A UK woman did not die of cannabis poisoning, despite inaccurate reports in the British press. How does one die from poisoning when the substance in question is one of the most non-toxic substances known to man? That's a very relevant question to be asking today, as a British story of a woman dying supposedly of cannabis poisoning went viral on the web. Doctors and cannabis experts tell us that someone overdosing on marijuana, quote unquote, is ridiculous and virtually impossible. The nonsense apparently first ran in the Telegraph, then it quickly spread to other British tabloids, such as the Daily Mail and the Mirror. Gemma Moss, a 31-year-old devout Christian and mother of three, is believed to have become the first woman in Britain to die directly from cannabis poisoning, the Telegraph's Sam Webb, who shall never again dwell in the land of factual journalism, gravely reported to us. Even Moss's local paper, the Bournemouth Daily Echo, did her the disrespect of reporting her death as the first woman in Britain to die of cannabis poisoning. Coroner Sheriff Payne reportedly found that Moss had moderate to high levels of pot in her system. Remember, marijuana is non-toxic, thus attributed her death to cannabis toxicity, which is patent nonsense, after consulting with one Dr. Kudair Hussain, a pathologist. Since the post-mortem could find no natural cause for her death, Payne claimed with the balance of probability that it is more likely than not she died from the effects of cannabis, thus launching a new pot myth and a worldwide media firestorm. Miss Moss's death was registered as cannabis toxicity, and a coroner has recorded a verdict of death by cannabis abuse, according to the Telegraph. I looked through literature, and it's well known that cannabis is of very low toxicity, Dr. Hussain said. But there are reports which say cannabis can be considered as a cause of death because it can induce a cardiac arrest. According to a Bournemouth inquest, Moss smoked half a joint every night to help her get to sleep. Her friend Zara Hill said they smoked about 20 pounds worth of cannabis together in the week before her death, reports Stephen Smith at the Daily Echo. And before you freak out, that's 20 British pounds, a unit of money. They didn't smoke 20 pounds of weed. In 40 years, I have never come across deaths from cannabis alone, said David Rains of the National Drug Prevention Alliance in the UK. There have been cases where it has been combined with other drugs or alcohol. On the night of October 28th of last year, Moss went to bed after rolling a joint. She was found unresponsive the next morning by Chloe Wilkinson, a girlfriend of Moss's teenage son. One doctor's note should not take precedence over decades of research demonstrating it is impossible to die from a marijuana overdose. Mason Tvert, communications director for the Marijuana Policy Project, told Toke Signals Thursday afternoon. The fact that this is news is telling, as it's only novel because there is no significant evidence that it has ever happened before. That raises a lot of questions about its validity and the doctor's competence, Tvert told me. According to all available studies, there has never been a death linked directly to cannabis use in human history, agreed MPP's communications manager Morgan Fox. We can blame cannabis prohibition and the stigma attached to the study of the plant's effects, for the relative ignorance of physicians when it comes to cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, Fox told Toke Signals. The pathologist involved really needs to do more research on the subject instead of brushing off the cause of this young woman's death on the first available explanation, Fox said. Her family and the general public deserve better. After I showed the story to Dan Riffle of the Marijuana Policy Project, Dan is Director of Federal Policies there at MPP, he said, "That's either inaccurate or the worst satire article I've ever read. It is estimated that someone would have to consume upwards of 1,500 pounds of marijuana in a single setting to induce a lethal overdose. According to the DEA's own administrative law judge, it's impossible to lethally overdose on marijuana. It is highly unlikely that Gemma Moss died from smoking marijuana," Lisa Roach Kuprian, RN, CCRC, CRNI, told Toke Signals. "It is my professional opinion that additional toxicology testing and a full autopsy be performed to rule out underlying medical conditions before placing blame on marijuana as a cause of death." Additionally, since Moss was reportedly taking prescription antidepressants, and deaths from antidepressants aren't uncommon, while deaths from cannabis just don't happen, it's quite possible that her death was due to pharmaceuticals and was simply and conveniently blamed on marijuana. Gemma Moss was under the care of Big Pharma and taking their products when she died, and now sadly her death is being used as an excuse for benighted drug warriors to claim cannabis can kill you. A bright spot in the day's otherwise abysmal reportage was the New York Daily News, who actually got the story right. To its credit, the Daily News didn't jump on the bandwagon, as did so many other news outlets. The coroner who said cannabis poisoning killed a British mother of 3 is likely blowing smoke, wrote Daily News reporter Michael Walsh. "From half a joint? That's ridiculous," reacted Dr. Yasmin Hurd, professor of psychiatry at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Dr. Bradley Flansbaum, a hospitalist at Lenox Hill Hospital, agreed. Both physicians said it was possible for a person to die after smoking pot if it had been laced with another drug. But the person would have died from the other drug, not from the cannabis. It would be very, very, very unlikely to get a lethal dose of marijuana if it wasn't adulterated with something, Dr. Flansbaum said. Both doctors also agreed that smoking could aggravate an existing heart condition, which could result in a person's death. But again, the heart condition, not the marijuana, would be responsible for that person's death, the physicians agreed. "You would need to literally consume a third of your body weight in marijuana," Tvert said. "There are no acute marijuana deaths." In Florida, good news this week. Big news, as voters there will get to decide on medical marijuana in November. Floridians will get to decide that question for themselves at the ballot box. A measure that would amend the state constitution to allow the medicinal use of cannabis in the Sunshine State cleared its final hurdle on Monday when the Florida Supreme Court approved its language. The justices approved the language by a 4-3 vote in a huge defeat for Republican Attorney General Pam Bondi, who challenged the ballot language, claiming it was misleading. Bondi claimed the ballot language misleadingly said that the state can trump federal marijuana laws and that the measure might allow doctors to prescribe cannabis for non-critical ailments. Personal injury lawyer John Morgan, a political power broker in Florida, has contributed about $4 million out of his pocket to the People for United for Medical Marijuana campaign to get that issue before voters. Incumbent Republican Governor Rick Scott opposes medical marijuana. Both of his Democratic challengers, State Senator Nan Rich and former Governor Charlie Crist, support the measure. Interestingly, a Thursday poll showed the pro-pot Crist leading the anti-pot Scott by 8 points. The measure still faces a daunting challenge. Florida law requires that constitutional amendments get 60% of the vote to pass, not a simple majority. A poll in November found overwhelming 82% support among Floridians for allowing adults to use cannabis for medical reasons if their doctor authorizes it. Just 16% said they were opposed. People United for Medical Marijuana plans to raise and spend at least $10 million on the fall ad campaign, according to organizer Ben Pilara. You may remember a story from last week where the Marijuana Policy Project had erected several billboards surrounding the stadium where the Super Bowl will be played. We had more developments in that story this week. First of all, the anti-marijuana group, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, led by Patrick Kennedy, put up their own billboard close to the Super Bowl. And that's already been followed up by the Marijuana Policy Project, which has now put up some more pro-pot billboards responding to the anti-pot billboard. The Marijuana Policy Project launched 2 new billboards Thursday night near MetLife Stadium, where the Super Bowl will be played on Sunday. They were responding to the anti-marijuana billboard posted on Wednesday by Smart Approaches to Marijuana. That's the group led by Patrick Kennedy working to keep marijuana illegal. Images of Sam's billboard and MPP's new billboard are on hemp.org at Hemp News if you would like to see those. New pro-marijuana billboards to go up around Super Bowl responding to new anti-pot billboard. One of the new ads is a spoof of the Sound billboard. The original Sound billboard features a football player under the text, motivation, perseverance, determination, and a marijuana leaf under the text, none of the above. It also reads, marijuana kills your drive. Don't lose in the game of life. MPP's spoof billboard features a shot of tequila under the text, overdose deaths, violent crimes, serious injuries, and a marijuana leaf under the text, none of the above. It also reads, prohibiting adults from making the safer choice is not a smart approach. The second ad features a statement made by Kennedy during a recent TV appearance. I agree with the president. Alcohol is more dangerous than marijuana. The folks working to keep marijuana illegal appear to have run out of compelling arguments, said MPP Director of Communications Mason Tvert. They are now just acknowledging that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol and telling people they will be losers if they make the safer choice. If Mr. Kennedy is concerned about public health and safety, and he knows that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol, why does he prefer that adults drink? Tvert said. Our society recognizes that adults should have the right to consume alcohol responsibly. Prohibiting those same adults from using a less harmful substance is not a very smart approach on marijuana. MPP's new digital billboards are scheduled to begin running at 12:01 a.m. ET, Eastern Time on Friday. The spoof ad will be located on I-495, leading to the Lincoln Tunnel west of routes 19. The billboard is facing east. The ad with Kennedy's quote will be located on I-80 west of the Turnpike and just east of River Street. That billboard's facing east as well. MPP made national headlines earlier this week when it launched a series of billboards surrounding MetLife Stadium that highlight the relative safety of marijuana compared to alcohol and also compared to playing professional football. MPP also delivered a Change.org petition to NFL headquarters in New York City on Wednesday, calling on the league to change its marijuana policy. On Toke Signals this week, we have a story that cops set up fake drug checkpoint signs on the highway and then detained and searched drivers who reacted to those signs. Checkpoints specifically to search for drugs are illegal, but that hasn't stopped local cops in Mayfield Heights, Ohio, from still finding a way to violate people's rights and conduct unreasonable searches, fake drug checkpoints. Police placed the drug checkpoint ahead signs along the freeway last year, warning motorists that the checkpoint was ahead. The cops then gathered in the express lanes of Interstate 271. Of course, there was no checkpoint, just cops waiting for motorists to react suspiciously after seeing the signs. It's a lawful and legitimate tactic in the war on drugs, claimed Mayfield Heights Assistant Prosecutor Dominic Vidantonio. It's a good thing, he said, but civil libertarians are skeptical, as is one of the people who was stopped and searched. They worry that officers are profiling motorists, possibly violating the Fourth Amendment rights of citizens against unlawful searches and seizures. We're going to be gathering information, said spokesman Nick Warner of the Cleveland office of the ACLU. which will examine the details of the fake checkpoint. That information will determine what we think is going on. Mayfield Heights police may believe they have concocted a scheme that allows them to circumvent the Constitution, but they are mistaken, said James Hardiman, legal director for the ACLU of Ohio. Americans have a fundamental right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, and courts have been clear that random drug checkpoints like Mayfield Heights are illegal. The ACLU of Ohio sent an August 2013 letter signed by Hardiman to Fred W. Bittner, chief of police in Mayfield Heights, warning that for a variety of reasons, we believe that the use of this particular type of checkpoint is troubling and raises serious constitutional concerns. Incredibly, the Mayfield Heights Police Department initially denied the existence of the checkpoint, according to the ACLU of Ohio. When confronted by someone on Facebook about the constitutionality of such a checkpoint, the official Mayfield Heights Police Department Facebook account posted a comment claiming there wasn't a drug checkpoint and random vehicles were not stopped. But some experts say that the fake checkpoints are legal. A 2000 ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court said actual drug checkpoints are not legal and that police can randomly stop vehicles for only two reasons: to prevent illegal aliens and contraband from entering the United States and to get drunk drivers off the road. Mayfield Heights Police on June 24, 2013 placed a series of signs along the northbound I-271 express lanes reading "Drug checkpoint ahead," "Police K9 dog in use," and "Prepare to stop." Officers then watched the reactions of motorists to the signs. There were arrests and drugs were seized, according to Bidentonio, who said 4 people were stopped and searched. 3 of the motorists crossed through the grassy median or at emergency vehicle crossings. Police said these evasive actions gave them probable cause to search those vehicles. The 4th driver, Bill Peters, 53, of Ohio, said he did nothing wrong. Peters said he simply parked on the side of the freeway to check his phone for directions. He was stopped and gave police permission to search his vehicle. By the way, let me give you a hint. Never give police permission to search. Make them do their jobs and get a warrant. Bidentonio said if Peters hadn't given police permission to search his car, they would have had to let him go. Peters said he was driving on Interstate 271 at about 11:30 a.m. when he missed the merge lane that would have allowed him to exit at Wilson Mills Road. He said he then pulled over to check his phone for directions. As he pulled back onto the freeway, he said his phone disconnected from the charger, so he pulled back over to reconnect it. Peters said he had seen the drug checkpoint signs and was not concerned. Although he has long hair, owns a music label, and hosts a heavy metal radio show at John Carroll University, he says he doesn't use marijuana, but wonders if officers targeted him because of his appearance. The last time I checked, it is not against the law to pull over to the side of the road to check directions, Peters said, adding that the officer who pulled him over commended him for being safety conscious. After returning to the freeway, Peters said he saw the sign that read "Prepare to stop," at which point he slowed down. Seconds later, a cop car was behind him with blue lights flashing. Peters said the officer asked him if he was having car trouble. Peters explained why he stopped and then slowed down. He said the officer asked him what kind of drugs he had in the car, saying it would be better to confess before other cops and the drug dog arrived. After Peters insisted he had no drugs, other officers and the dog were summoned, as promised. "I see what they're doing, but I think it's kind of dangerous," Peters said. "It's one thing to do this on a 25-mile-an-hour road. It's another on a busy interstate. I think it's a violation to just be pulled over and searched. But, and this is something we all need to remember, police aren't required to tell the truth, according to Rick Simmons, a professor of law at the Moritz College of Law at Ohio State University. They can lie to anybody," Simmons said. Civil rights attorney Terry Gilbert, based in Cleveland, thinks the reason for stopping Peters was questionable at best. Police are allowed to lie to suspects, he said, but he questioned the practice of deceiving motorists about a fake drug checkpoint on a busy interstate highway. "I don't think it accomplishes any public safety goals," Gilbert said. "I don't think it's good to mislead the population for any reason if you're a government agency. It's important to know your rights, even more so if you are a cannabis consumer in a prohibitionist state like Ohio. You must stop when an officer pulls you over for a traffic violation, but it does not necessarily mean they can search your car without your permission," said Michael Benza, a law professor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law. Police need to be able to provide a judge with a legal and valid reason for why they ordered a search of your car. Police should enforce the laws and protect the public, not seek to skirt the law and trick the public, said Hardiman of the ACLU of Ohio. This type of law enforcement is not only unconstitutional, it is counterproductive to the police department's ultimate goals. If Mayfield Heights police are planning to run these drug checkpoints in the future, I strongly urge them to reconsider, Hardiman said. Finally, this week, as we often do, we have a must-read story from Ron Marksick. And you will recall Ron. He is, of course, the former NYPD cop, former high school health teacher, the unstoppable Captain Cannabinoid, also known as Captain Cannabis. Ron Marksick, RN, Toke Signals columnist, tells you all about the top 10 studies showing medical marijuana helps fight Parkinson's disease. Ron has gathered 10 of the very best, most convincing studies about cannabis and Parkinson's disease, and he presents them for your edification on Toke Signals this week. Check it out, won't you? I hope you decide to come back and join us again next week for the next episode of Toke TV. Until then, why not stay lifted?